In a bold move, 56 men signed a document that changed the course of history forever. They were risking everything. These men, representing the 13 American colonies, were not just signing a piece of paper. They were signing a declaration of their intent to form a new nation, free from the tyranny of British rule. Each stroke of the pen was a step towards an uncertain future, filled with both hope and peril. If caught, they faced certain death. The British Crown would consider them traitors, and the punishment for treason was execution. The signers were fully aware of the gravity of their actions. They knew that their families, their fortunes, and their very lives were on the line. Yet they proceeded with unwavering resolve, driven by a vision of a free and independent America. The Declaration of Independence was ratified on July 4, 1776. This date would forever be etched in the annals of history as the birth of a new nation. The document itself was a masterful articulation of the colonies' grievances and their right to self-determination. It was a bold assertion that all men are created equal, endowed with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was a pivotal moment for America. The colonies, once disparate and divided, were now united in a common cause. The streets of colonial towns were filled with celebrations as people waved flags and cheered for the promise of a new beginning. The Declaration was not just a statement of independence, it was a rallying cry that galvanized the colonists and inspired them to fight for their freedom. The document was a direct challenge to the most powerful nation on earth. The British Empire, with its vast resources and formidable military, was not an adversary to be taken lightly. The colonies were up against a well-established power that had little intention of relinquishing its control. The Declaration was a bold proclamation that the colonies would no longer be subjugated, that they would stand and fight for their right to self-governance. It proclaimed the colonies' separation from British rule. This was not a mere request for better treatment, it was a definitive statement of independence. The colonies were breaking free from the chains of oppression, determined to forge their own path. The Declaration was a powerful symbol of their resolve to create a nation where liberty and justice would prevail. The Declaration was fueled by grievances like taxation without representation. The colonists had long been subjected to unfair taxes imposed by a distant government that gave them no voice. The rallying cry of no taxation without representation echoed through the colonies, encapsulating their frustration and anger. The Declaration was a response to these injustices, a demand for a government that would be accountable to the people it served. The colonists were tired of being treated unfairly. They had endured years of exploitation and neglect, and their patience had worn thin. The Declaration was a manifestation of their collective will to stand up against tyranny. It was a declaration that they would no longer accept being treated as second-class citizens in their own land. They wanted a say in their own government. The colonists yearned for a system where their voices would be heard, where they could participate in the decisions that affected their lives. The Declaration was a call for democracy, for a government that derived its power from the consent of the governed. It was a vision of a society where every individual had a stake in the future of their nation. Thomas Jefferson, a young Virginia lawyer, crafted the document. Jefferson was a brilliant thinker and a gifted writer, and he was tasked with articulating the colony's aspirations. Drawing upon his deep knowledge of philosophy and political theory, he penned a document that would resonate through the ages. His words captured the essence of the American spirit, a spirit of independence and self-determination. He drew upon Enlightenment ideas of natural rights and self-governance. The Enlightenment was a period of intellectual awakening where thinkers like John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau championed the principles of individual liberty and the social contract. Jefferson's declaration was deeply influenced by these ideas, asserting that governments are instituted to protect the rights of the people, and that when a government fails in this duty, the people have the right to alter or abolish it. The signing took place in Philadelphia, a city already alive with revolutionary spirit. Philadelphia was a hub of political activity, a place where ideas of independence and self-governance were fervently discussed. Independence Hall, where the Continental Congress met, was the epicenter of this revolutionary fervor. It was within these walls that the Declaration was debated, revised, and ultimately adopted. Each man who signed knew the gravity of the act, They were not just signing a document, they were making a solemn pledge to each other and to the cause of liberty. The weight of their decision was evident in their serious expressions. They understood that their signatures represented a commitment to fight for their beliefs, no matter the cost. They were committing treason against the crown. The British government would view their actions as a direct affront to its authority. The signers were fully aware that they were placing themselves in grave danger, yet they were willing to take this risk, driven by their unwavering belief in the righteousness of their cause. Some, like John Hancock, signed their names large enough for the king to read. Hancock's bold signature became a symbol of defiance. It was a clear message to the British Crown that the colonies were united and resolute. The signers wanted to leave no doubt about their determination to achieve independence. They wanted to make their defiance clear. The declaration was not just a statement of intent, it was a declaration of war against tyranny. The signers were prepared to back their words with action, to fight for the principles they held dear. Their defiance was a testament to their courage and their unwavering commitment to the cause of freedom. This bold declaration laid the foundation for a nation aspiring for freedom and equality. The ideals enshrined in the Declaration would become the guiding principles of the United States. It was a vision of a society where all individuals are treated with dignity and respect, where liberty and justice are the cornerstones of the nation. It was a beacon of hope, not just for the colonists, but for people all over the world. The Declaration inspired movements for independence and human rights across the globe. It was a powerful affirmation of the universal principles of freedom and equality, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The fight for independence would be long and bloody, but the signing of the Declaration was a crucial first step. It marked the beginning of a struggle that would ultimately lead to the birth of a new nation. The courage and determination of the signers set the stage for the American Revolution, a conflict that would shape the course of history and lay the foundation for the United States of America. To truly understand the significance of the Declaration, we must journey back to the years leading up to its creation. The story of America's quest for independence is not just a tale of battles and declarations, but a complex narrative of growing discontent and a yearning for self-determination. The seeds of discontent were sown long before the fateful summer of 1776. The American colonies, though geographically distant from Britain, were deeply influenced by the political and economic policies of the British Crown. For over a century, the American colonies had grown accustomed to a degree of self-governance. They had their own assemblies and levied their own taxes. This autonomy allowed them to develop a unique identity, distinct from their British counterparts. The colonists valued their local governance and the relative freedom it provided. However, the relationship between Great Britain and her American colonies began to sour in the mid-18th century. The British government, seeking to exert more control over its distant territories, began to implement policies that were increasingly seen as overreaching and oppressive by the colonists. The French and Indian War, fought between 1754 and 1763, left Great Britain deeply in debt. The war had been expensive, and the British government looked to the colonies as a source of revenue to help pay off this debt. To replenish its coffers, the British Parliament imposed a series of taxes on the colonies. These included the Stamp Act of 1765, which required colonists to pay a tax on all printed materials. This was seen as a direct attempt by Britain to raise money from the colonies without their consent. The colonists viewed these taxes as unjust. They argued that they were being taxed without representation in Parliament. This principle, that taxes should not be levied without the consent of the governed, was a cornerstone of their political beliefs. The cry of no taxation without representation became a rallying cry for colonial resistance. It encapsulated the growing frustration and anger among the colonists who felt their rights as Englishmen were being trampled upon. Protests erupted across the colonies. These were not just isolated incidents, but part of a broader movement that saw colonists from different regions coming together in opposition to British policies. The Sons of Liberty, a secret society opposed to British rule, organized boycotts of British goods. These boycotts were a powerful form of protest, hitting Britain where it hurt most, its economy. The relationship between Great Britain and the colonies continued to deteriorate. Each new measure imposed by the British government was met with increased resistance from the colonists. The British government responded to colonial resistance with increasingly harsh measures. These included the deployment of more troops to enforce British laws and the implementation of punitive acts designed to punish the colonies for their defiance. This only served to further alienate the colonists and push them closer to rebellion. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, one that would ultimately lead to the birth of a new nation. The year 1775 marked a turning point in the relationship between Great Britain and the colonies. In April of that year, British troops clashed with colonial militiamen in Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. These battles, known as the shots heard round the world, signaled the start of the American Revolutionary War. The Second Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia in May 1775. This body, composed of delegates from the 13 colonies, assumed the role of a wartime government. They appointed George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. The Congress also authorized the printing of money and made efforts to secure foreign alliances. Despite these acts of defiance, many colonists still hoped for reconciliation with Great Britain. However, the publication of Thomas Paine's pamphlet in January 1776 helped to galvanize public opinion in favor of independence. Paine argued in clear and persuasive language that it was common sense for the colonies to break away from British rule. By the summer of 1776, the tide of public opinion had turned decisively in favor of independence. The colonies, once disparate and divided, had found common ground in their shared grievances against British rule. The oppressive measures imposed by the Crown, including taxation without representation and the quartering of British troops in colonial homes, had united the colonies in their quest for freedom. The fervor for independence was palpable, with town meetings and public gatherings echoing the call for liberty. The spirit of revolution was in the air, and the colonies were ready to take a bold step towards self-governance. On June 7, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia introduced a resolution in the Second Continental Congress declaring that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. This bold proclamation was met with both enthusiasm and trepidation. The delegates knew that such a declaration would irrevocably sever ties with Britain and plunge the colonies into uncharted territory. Yet, the resolve for independence was unwavering. Lee's resolution was a clarion call, a definitive statement that the colonies were ready to stand on their own. Congress debated Lee's resolution for several days. The discussions were intense and impassioned, with delegates weighing the risks and rewards of such a monumental decision. Some feared the might of the British military, while others were concerned about the colonies' ability to govern themselves. However, the desire for self-determination and the belief in the colonies' right to govern themselves ultimately prevailed. The debates highlighted the courage and conviction of the delegates, who were willing to risk everything for the cause of liberty. On June 11th, Congress appointed a committee of 5 men to draft a Declaration of Independence. This committee was tasked with articulating the colonies' reasons for seeking independence and outlining the principles that would guide the new nation. The selection of the committee members was a strategic decision, ensuring that the declaration would reflect a broad consensus and be persuasive to both domestic and international audiences. The committee consisted of Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman. These men were chosen for their wisdom, eloquence, and commitment to the cause of independence. Each brought a unique perspective and set of skills to the task, ensuring that the Declaration would be a powerful and compelling document. Jefferson, known for his eloquent writing style, was tasked with drafting the document. His ability to articulate complex ideas in a clear and persuasive manner made him the ideal choice for this monumental task. Jefferson's draft would become the foundation of the Declaration of Independence, a document that would inspire generations to come. Jefferson drew inspiration from a variety of sources, including the writings of John Locke and other Enlightenment thinkers. These philosophers had articulated the principles of natural rights and the social contract, ideas that resonated deeply with Jefferson and the other members of the committee. The Enlightenment's emphasis on reason, individual rights, and the pursuit of knowledge provided a philosophical foundation for the Declaration. He believed that all men are endowed with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These rights, Jefferson argued, were inherent and could not be taken away by any government. This assertion formed the core of the Declaration, a powerful statement of the colony's commitment to individual freedom and self-determination. Jefferson argued that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and that the people have a right to alter or abolish any government that becomes destructive of these ends. This radical idea challenged the traditional notions of monarchy and divine right, asserting that the legitimacy of government is based on the will of the people. The Declaration was not just a statement of independence, but a profound assertion of the principles of democracy and human rights.